What if the person you treated like dirt today was actually the person who controlled your entire future? Because that is exactly what happened in this story. And by the end of it, I promise you, you will never look at a stranger the same way again. There was a man named Richard Harmon, and if you saw him walking down the street on a Tuesday morning, you would probably cross to the other side. Not because he was scary, but because he looked like he had nothing. Old torn jacket, a beat-up cart, a broom that had seen better days, dirty hands, hunchback, a gray wig pulled low over his forehead. But here is the thing about Richard Harmon. He was worth $47 million. He owned 3 companies, 2 apartment buildings, a ranch in Texas, and a house so big that the cleaning staff needed a map to not get lost inside it. So why was he dressed like a garbage collector, pushing a cart through his own neighborhood at 6 in the morning? Because he needed to know the truth about someone, and he knew that the truth never shows itself when people think they are being watched. Let me take you back to where this all started. Richard had one son. His name was Daniel. Daniel was a good man, the kind of son every father prays for. Hardworking, humble, loyal. And about 8 months before this story really begins, Daniel married a woman named Stephanie. Now on the surface, Stephanie was everything a family could want. She was smart, well-dressed, polite at dinner, and said all the right things in front of the right people. At the wedding, she cried when she said her vows. She hugged Richard and called him Dad before he even asked her to. Richard smiled, but something in his chest felt off. He could not explain it. It was like when you hear a sound in your house at night and you don't know what it was, but you know something is not right. He started paying attention. Little things. The way Stephanie talked to the housekeeper when she thought no one was listening. The way she rolled her eyes when Daniel's old college friends came over. The way she smiled at Richard when he was looking. And then Richard was a self-made man. He had grown up with nothing. He had worked in warehouses, driven trucks, slept in his car for 3 months when he was 22. He knew people. He could read a room. And something about Stephanie felt like a performance. But he had no proof. And he wasn't the kind of man to destroy his son's marriage over a feeling. So he came up with a plan. He called his old friend, a retired costume designer named Marcy, and he told her what he needed. Marcy thought he was crazy. She told him that 3 times. But she also knew Richard well enough to know that when he made up his mind, there was no changing it. 3 days later, Richard had his disguise. Gray wig, fake wrinkles, glasses with thick lenses, a worn-out city jacket with a faded patch on the shoulder, rubber gloves, a cart, a broom. He practiced walking slower, practiced hunching his shoulders, practiced a soft, raspy voice. He became Margaret, an old woman who collected recyclables from the neighborhood every morning. The first day, he just walked past the house, got a feel for the routine. What time Stephanie woke up, when Daniel left for work, who came and went. The second day, he got closer. He was picking up a plastic bottle near the driveway when Stephanie walked out to get the mail. She looked at him, or rather, she looked through him, the way people look at someone they have already decided does not matter. No nod, no smile. She grabbed her mail and walked back inside without a single word. Richard said nothing. He kept sweeping. On the third day, he made his first move. He knocked on the side gate, the one that led to the kitchen entrance. Stephanie opened it with her phone in one hand and coffee in the other. "Good morning, sweetheart," Richard said in his Margaret voice, soft and tired. "I'm sorry to bother you. I collect the recycling on this street. I just wanted to ask if you had any cardboard or bottles you might want to set aside for me. Every little bit helps." Stephanie looked at him the way you look at a piece of junk mail. Not angry, just completely uninterested in its existence. "We have a recycling bin," she said. "The city picks it up." Of course, Richard nodded. "I just thought maybe." "I can't help you," Stephanie said. And she closed the gate. Not slammed it. Just closed it. Quietly. Which somehow felt worse. Richard stood there for a second. Then he picked up his broom and kept walking. He came back the next day, and the day after that, and every morning, he would find a small reason to be near the house. Sweeping the sidewalk, sorting through the public bin at the corner, moving slowly up the street. And every morning, Stephanie walked past him like he was part of the furniture. One morning it was raining. Not heavy, just that cold, miserable drizzle that soaks through everything. Richard was at the corner, his jacket completely wet, pretending to sort through a bin. His hands were shaking, partly from the cold, partly from what he was feeling inside. Stephanie came out in a raincoat with a coffee in her hand, walking toward her car. She saw him. Their eyes met for just a second. She got in the car and drove away. He stood in the rain. Now here is where the story turns. Because the next morning, something different happened. Richard was at the corner as usual. But this time, Daniel's car pulled up. Daniel had come home early from a work trip. And with him was his old childhood friend, a woman named Gloria, who had grown up in Richard's neighborhood back when he had nothing. Gloria saw the old woman at the corner. And without missing a beat, without any reason to stop, she walked over. "Ma'am, are you doing okay? You need anything? You want me to grab you a coffee from inside?" Richard almost broke character right there. "I'm all right, honey. Thank you," he managed. "You sure? It's cold out here." Gloria looked genuinely concerned. She pulled a $10 bill from her pocket and held it out. "Please, take it." Richard shook his head gently. "You keep it. You're a good girl." Gloria smiled, squeezed his hand, and walked inside. Richard stood there for a long moment. He thought about what his mother used to say when he was young. She used to say, "You can fake a smile, but you cannot fake a reflex. What a person does without thinking, that's who they really are." Gloria did not think. She just helped. Stephanie did not think either. And that told Richard everything. But he wanted one last test. The most important one. The next morning, he put the plan into full motion. He arranged with Marcy to have a small fake scenario set up. He would pretend to trip and fall near the front of the house. Marcy's daughter, playing a passerby, would be nearby but would not help. She would just keep walking, as instructed, to see what Stephanie would do when she was the only one there. It was 7:40 in the morning. Stephanie was walking to her car, keys in hand. Richard stumbled near the garden wall. He let himself fall, slowly, carefully, onto the grass. His cart tipped over. He let out a weak groan. He heard Stephanie's footsteps stop. He waited. 5 seconds. 10. And her footsteps walked away. She drove off. Richard lay on the grass for a moment. Alone. A $47 million man lying on the wet grass in a gray wig. And his chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with the fall. He got up slowly, took off his glasses, looked at the house his son came home to every night. And he made his decision. That Sunday, Richard invited Daniel and Stephanie to dinner. His house. No staff. Just the three of them. The table was set beautifully. Richard cooked himself pasta, garlic bread, the same meal he used to make for Daniel when he was a kid and they couldn't afford restaurants. Dinner was pleasant. Stephanie was charming, as always, laughing at the right moments, complimenting the food, touching Daniel's hand across the table. After dinner, Richard asked if they could all sit in the living room for a bit. He said he had something he wanted to share. He walked to the side table and picked up a small envelope. Inside were photos, printed clearly. Him as Margaret, outside their house, at the corner, in the rain. He placed them on the coffee table. Stephanie's face changed, just for a second. But it changed. "That was me," Richard said quietly. "For the past 3 weeks." The room went completely silent. "I wasn't trying to trick you for fun," he continued. "I needed to see something. Because I can teach my son how to build a business. I can teach him how to handle money, how to lead people, how to get back up when life knocks him down. But the one thing I cannot teach him is how to choose who he builds his life with. That part, he had to figure out on his own. But I needed to know if the person he chose had a good heart." Daniel was staring at the photos. His face was a mix of 100 emotions at once. Stephanie's voice came out thin and tight. "Richard, I'm not angry," Richard said. And he meant it. His voice was calm, not cold, just honest. "But I am not going to pretend I didn't see what I saw. A person who cannot see the humanity in someone who is less than them. That's not something that changes because they found out they were being watched. That is who they are when nobody is watching. And that is what matters most." He looked at his son. "I love you, Daniel. And I want you to be happy. Truly happy. Not just comfortable. Not just settled. But the kind of happy that comes from being with someone who would help a stranger in the rain." Daniel did not say anything for a long time. He just looked at the photos. Then he looked at his wife. And somewhere in that look, without a single word, a conversation happened that only 2 people in a marriage can have. Stephanie left that night. Not forever. That part of the story belongs to Daniel. But she left that night. And some doors, once they open, show you things you cannot unsee. 3 months later, Daniel called his father on a quiet Thursday evening. "Dad," he said, "I think I knew. I think I always knew something was off. I just didn't want to see it. Richard sat in his kitchen, the same man who had pushed a cart down the street in a gray wig. And he said, "That's not weakness, son. That's love. Love makes you want to believe the best in people. But wisdom is knowing when to open your eyes." They talked for 2 hours that night. Here is what this story is really about. It is not about the disguise. It is not about the money. It is about the fact that who you are, when no one is watching, is the most honest version of yourself that will ever exist. You can dress yourself up in kindness at parties. You can say the right things at the dinner table. You can perform warmth for an audience. But what do you do when you pass someone on the street who has nothing? What do you do when someone falls and you think no one is looking? What do you do when kindness costs you 30 seconds and nothing else? That is the real you. And the real you has a way of showing up, one way or another. Richard Harmon spent $47 million building a life. But the lesson he was most proud of, the one he hoped his son would carry forever, cost nothing at all. It was just this: treat every single person you meet like they matter, because you never know who is watching. And more importantly, even if nobody is watching, it still says everything about who you are. Watch the next video showing up on your screen right now. You won't regret it.